My name is Stella. I'm 23 years old. I walked through my own front door still bent over from the stitches in my abdomen, and my brother didn't even look up from his phone. Then he did, and instead of asking if I was okay, he said, "Nice of you to finally come home. Quit faking it and get dinner on the table." I had just spent 4 days in the hospital after emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix that had nearly killed me. And that was what was waiting for me at home. What Derek didn't notice was the man standing right behind me, and when he finally did, his face went white. To explain how it got to that point, I have to go back 4 years. I was 19 when I signed the lease on my first apartment, a tiny one-bedroom 10 minutes from campus. It wasn't much. The walls were thin, the radiator rattled all night, and the kitchen was barely large enough for one person to turn around in, but it was mine. I paid for it with 2 part-time jobs and whatever was left of my student loans. Then my mom called. "Derek lost his job again," she said, in that tone she always used, half sigh, half accusation, like the problem already belonged to me. "He just needs a place for a few months. You have the apartment now." Derek was 23 then, 4 years older than me. He'd been fired from another warehouse job for showing up late too many times. Mom called it bad luck. I called it a pattern, though not out loud. "He'll pay half the rent," she promised. "I raised you 2 by myself after the divorce. When I ask for something, it's because I have no one else to ask." So I said yes. Because when the woman who worked herself to exhaustion to keep the lights on asks for help, you don't calculate. You don't negotiate, you open the door. Derek moved in on a Sunday. He dropped 2 garbage bags full of clothes onto my couch, looked around and said, "Yeah, this'll work." The first month, he gave me $200. I covered the rest. The second month, nothing. The third month, nothing again. When I asked about it, he shrugged. "I'm between things, I'll catch up," I called Mom. "He said he's been paying you directly," I told her. "He said you were supposed to send it to me." There was a pause, just a beat too long. "He's going through a rough patch, sweetheart, don't push him." The money never came. Not that month, not the one after, not ever. 6 months passed, and Derek was still on my couch, except by then it wasn't really my couch anymore. His gaming console sat where my textbooks used to be. His sneakers lined the hallway. His friends came over on weeknights, drinking beer until 2 in the morning, while I tried to sleep before a 7 a.m. shift. I graduated and landed an internship at a logistics company outside town. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but it was a foot in the door. I needed sleep. I needed quiet. I needed the kitchen counter clean, so I could prep meals for the week. Instead, I came home to dishes stacked in the sink, takeout containers on the stove, and Derek sprawled across the couch with the TV blaring. "Hey," he'd say without looking away from the screen. "What's for dinner?" It started casually, almost like a joke. But jokes stop being funny when they happen every night. I cooked because it was easier to make 2 plates than 1. Then it became expected, then it became required. If I didn't cook, Derek called Mom. Mom called me. "He says you're making things difficult." "It's 1 plate, Stella." It's not that hard. Slowly, I started to feel like a guest in my own apartment. My name was on the lease. My paycheck covered every bill. My groceries filled the fridge. But the space, the noise, the routine, the air itself belonged to Derek. One night I opened the mail and found 3 overdue bills in my name: internet, electric, and water. Derek had told me he'd handled them months earlier. He hadn't. He'd lied. I sat at the kitchen table holding those envelopes and realized that a few months had quietly become my whole life. I confronted Mom. "You told me Derek was paying you $400 a month for family expenses," I said. "You said you'd send it to me." Silence. "Is he paying you or not?" More silence. I already knew the answer. Then I called Derek. "Mom says you've been paying her rent money, have you?" He laughed. "She told you that?" "No, she said I could stay for free." "Said you were fine with it." That was the moment it clicked. Mom had told Derek I agreed to let him live there rent-free. She had told me Derek was paying her. Neither story was true. The only thing that was true was me paying for everything. buying the groceries, washing the dishes, and keeping my mouth shut. And it got worse. Around the same time, I got my first real paycheck. Mom asked me to send her $300 a month for what she called a family fund. Just a little something to help your mother out. I sent it every month without question because questioning her felt like betrayal. The one time I asked what the money was for, she cried immediately. After everything I sacrificed for you too, this is how you repay me. And that was the end of that conversation. I hung up, sent the money, made Derek dinner, and buried the anger so deep it stopped feeling like anger at all. It just became weight. By the time I was 23, I was working full-time at Belmer Logistics. My supervisor's boss was a man named Adrian Hall, the operations director. Mid-30s, sharp, quiet. The kind of man who noticed things without making a show of it. I was good at my job, better than good. But I was running on fumes. I'd lost weight I couldn't spare. I slept badly. I had headaches that sat behind my eyes for days. And for 2 weeks, there had been this dull pain low in my abdomen that came and went. I ignored it. Because who was going to cook for Derek if I called out sick? Who was going to pay the electric bill? Who was going to hold everything together? My best friend Sarah, who worked as a nurse at County General, saw me wince over lunch. "Stell, you need to get that checked out. It's stress. You've been saying that for 2 weeks. Let me take you to the ER. I'm fine." At work, Adrian stopped by my desk one afternoon. "You keep holding your side," he said, not a question. "I'm fine," I said again. By then the word tasted like a lie. That night I was brushing my teeth when the pain hit. It wasn't dull anymore. It was sharp and sudden, like something inside me had torn open. I dropped to my knees on the bathroom tile. My vision blurred. I heard Derek in the living room. The TV was loud enough to shake the walls. He heard me fall. I know he did. He knocked once. "You good?" I'm trying to watch something. I was curled up on the floor, barely able to breathe, and I called Sarah. She called 911 before I finished my second sentence. The paramedics arrived in 14 minutes. Derek opened the door in sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, looked at the EMTs and the stretcher, and said, "Does this really need to be so loud?" It's almost midnight. They found me on the bathroom floor, barely conscious. One of them said something about my pulse being too fast. They loaded me onto the stretcher. I remember staring up at the ceiling as they rolled me through the apartment, past the water stain near the kitchen and the light fixture I'd replaced myself the winter before. Derek watched from the couch. He didn't stand up. He didn't ask where they were taking me. He didn't come with me. At the hospital, the surgeon told Sarah what she already suspected. My appendix had ruptured. Peritonitis had already started. A few more hours and I would have gone septic. I went into surgery at 1:30 in the morning. When I woke up, Sarah was in the chair beside my bed, still wearing the scrubs from her own shift. "Did Derek call?" I whispered. She shook her head. Over the next 4 days, I lay in that hospital bed with a drain in my side and an IV in my arm. Sarah came every day. My coworkers sent a card. Adrian emailed me himself to say my position was safe and to focus on healing. My mother called once. Sarah answered because I was asleep. Later, she told me what happened. Mom didn't ask how the surgery went. She didn't ask if I was okay. She said, "Tell Stella to call Derek. He hasn't had a proper meal in 2 days." Sarah hung up on her. On the 3rd day, once I could sit up again, Sarah brought me my laptop so I could check a few emails. Not because work needed me, but because I needed something to look at besides the ceiling. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, quiet in a way that meant she was trying to decide whether to say something. "Just say it," I told her. She folded her hands and exhaled. "Derek hasn't texted you once, not one message. Your mom hasn't come. You almost died in your bathroom, and the only people who have shown up are me and your coworkers." I stared out the window at a tree just starting to leaf. "I know," I said. "You could have died, Stell, and they're worried about dinner." There was a long silence. Then I said, "Can you do me a favor? Go to my apartment, top drawer of my desk. There's a folder with a blue tab. It has my lease in it. Bring it back." She blinked, but she didn't ask why. She just stood up, grabbed her keys, and said, "I'll be back in an hour." After she left, I lay back and stared at the ceiling again, but I wasn't drowning anymore. I was planning 30 days. That was the legal notice required for an unauthorized occupant in my state. On the fourth morning, the doctor signed my discharge papers. He was very clear. No lifting, no prolonged standing, no strain. If I got a fever or sharp pain, I was to come straight back. Sarah was supposed to pick me up, but there had been a major accident at the hospital, and she texted me that she was stuck. A minute later, she sent another message. "Adrian can take you. He has the morning free. Is that okay?" I hesitated. He was my boss's boss, but it was only a 15-minute drive and I could barely afford a cab, so I said yes. He pulled up at 11 sharp in a dark gray sedan. Button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, no tie. He got out, opened the passenger door, and took my hospital bag before I could protest. "How are you feeling?" he asked as we pulled away. "Like I've been opened up and stapled back together." He almost smiled. "That sounds medically accurate." The ride was quiet in a way that felt considerate, not awkward. We talked about work for a few minutes, a delayed client deadline, a project that had shifted. He didn't ask about my family, and I didn't offer anything. When we reached my building, he helped me up the stairs one step at a time. My stitches pulled with every movement. He carried my bag and waited while I fumbled with my keys. The second I opened the door, the smell hit me. Old food, beer, stale air, 4 days of neglect trapped inside 600 square feet. Derek was on the couch, sprawled out with his phone in one hand and the remote in the other. The TV was blasting some game show. Beer cans were scattered across the coffee table. A pizza box sat open on the floor with one hard, dried slice left inside. He turned his head, saw me standing there hunched over and pale in the clothes Sarah had brought to the hospital, and said, "Nice of you to finally come home. Quit faking it and get dinner on the table." I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just looked at him, then his eyes shifted over my shoulder. Adrian stepped into the doorway behind me, holding my hospital bag. My discharge papers were sticking out of the top, the hospital logo bright and unmistakable. The apartment went quiet except for the TV. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. "Who's that?" I didn't answer him. I walked past him as carefully as I could and into the kitchen. The sink was full of crusted dishes. There was a pot on the stove with something burned black inside it, a glass with dried milk at the bottom. The trash was overflowing. The groceries I had bought before being rushed to the hospital were still sitting where I'd left them. A package of chicken had gone bad and was leaking onto the counter. 4 days. He couldn't wash one plate. I turned back toward the living room. Adrian was still standing by the door, silent, watching everything. 4 days, I said quietly. "You couldn't wash a single plate." Derek swallowed hard. I kept moving through the apartment because I needed to see it all with clear eyes. His shoes were kicked against the hallway wall. A hoodie was on the floor. A damp towel hung from the bathroom door. Then I opened my bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it. Bed made, desk clean, lamp in place. The blue-tabbed folder Sarah had brought back from the hospital sat right where I'd asked her to leave it. The contrast was nauseating. My room looked like the apartment of a functioning adult. The rest looked like abandonment. Behind me, I heard Adrian set my bag down on the bed. He didn't comment. He didn't need to. When I walked back into the living room, I finally saw the whole picture as if I were seeing it for the first time. Derek had turned my couch into a bed. Blankets, pillows, controller cords, wrappers. A large TV mounted to the wall that I hadn't bought. A console I hadn't bought. Electricity I absolutely paid for. This was what just a few months looked like after 4 years. One person living. One person paying. I went to the kitchen table, opened the folder, and took out my lease. Derek noticed the papers immediately. I could see him recalculating, trying to read the room, trying to figure out who Adrian was and why his presence suddenly made everything look different. "Hey, sis," he said, his whole tone changing. Softer, friendlier. "I was just kidding, you know me. Stupid joke. Sit down, relax, I'll order us a pizza. He actually stood up and tried to shake Adrian's hand. Thanks for bringing her home, man. Appreciate it. Family's been worried sick. Adrian looked at his hand, then at him, and gave the smallest possible nod without taking it. Derek dropped his hand. I sat at the kitchen table, spread the lease flat, and said, "Sit down, Derek." He laughed nervously. "Come on, Stell." "What is this? Sit down." Something in my voice must have landed because he did. Adrian stayed where he was, silent and watchful. I put my finger on the tenant line. "This is the lease for this apartment, signed by me, renewed by me every year for 4 years, one name, mine." Derek shifted in his chair. "Okay, you are not on it." "You never were," Mom said. "Mom does not own this apartment. Mom does not rent this apartment. Mom does not pay for this apartment. I do." He opened his mouth again, but I kept going. "You do not pay rent. You have never paid rent. Not once in 4 years. You do not pay utilities. You do not buy groceries. You do not contribute to this household in any meaningful way." His eyes flicked toward Adrian and back to me. "So what?" he snapped. "You're kicking me out after everything." I folded my hands on top of the lease and ignored the pull in my stitches. "I'm giving you 30 days notice. That's the legal requirement." "You have 30 days to move out." His face changed instantly. "You can't be serious." "I am. That's insane." "No." "It's late." He shoved his chair back hard enough that it scraped across the floor and pulled out his phone. "Fine, I'm calling Mom." He put her on speaker. She answered on the second ring. "Derek." "What's wrong?" He looked at me. "Tell her, Stella, tell Mom what you're doing." I leaned forward slightly. "Hi, Mom." The second she heard my voice, hers sharpened. "Stella, what is going on?" "Derek says you're threatening to throw him out." "I'm not threatening him, I'm notifying him." "You can't do that." "He's your brother. He's an adult man who has lived in my apartment for 4 years without paying a dime. He's going through a rough patch. Mom." I almost died 4 days ago. That got half a second of silence. "No one came to the hospital," I said. "You didn't visit, Derek didn't call." And the first thing he said when I walked through my own door after surgery was to tell me to stop faking it and make him dinner. The line went quiet. Derek stared at the phone like it might save him. "You're exaggerating," Mom said finally. "Derek told me it was just a stomach bug. You were only gone a few days." I looked up at Adrian. He didn't nod or react. He just met my eyes, steady and present, and that was enough. "It was not a stomach bug," I said. "It was a ruptured appendix. Emergency surgery." The surgeon said another few hours and I would have gone septic. This silence was longer. Then my mother said slowly, "Derek, you told me she had a stomach ache." Derek said nothing. And just like that, the version of reality they had built together cracked. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk about all of it." Derek shifted in his seat. Adrian still didn't move. "In 4 years, I have paid every month of rent on this apartment. $1,100 a month. That's $52,800. Derek contributed 0. No one interrupted. "You told me Derek was sending you $400 a month for family expenses. He told me he never gave you a dime, so somebody lied." Derek's foot stopped bouncing. "I've also sent you $300 every month since I got my first paycheck. That's $14,400. What exactly was that money for?" I could hear my mother breathing on the other end of the line. "Utilities, internet, groceries, cleaning supplies, all me." Roughly another $19,000 over 4 years. Added up, it's more than $86,000. "Family doesn't keep score like that," she said weakly. "You're right," I said. "A family shouldn't do this to each other at all." Even Derek flinched at that. Then Mom changed tactics. "You're saying all this in front of a stranger. You want to embarrass your family?" "I'm not embarrassing this family, I'm describing it." There was dead silence. Then Mom asked sharply, "Who is there?" "Who is listening to this?" Derek muttered. "Some guy, he drove her home." "What guy?" "Stella, who's in that room with you?" Before I could answer, Adrian stepped forward just enough for his voice to carry clearly. "Ma'am, my name is Adrian Hall. I drove Stella home from the hospital today." because no one in her family came to pick her up. I've been here about 15 minutes, and what I've seen and heard is deeply concerning. Even the television seemed quieter after that. This is a private family matter, my mother said. I understand, Adrian replied. He didn't argue, he just let the truth sit there. Derek stood up, puffing himself up. Look, man, this is family business. You don't get a say here. Adrian didn't even look at him. He turned to me instead. Stella, do you want me to stay? One question. No pressure, no performance. Yes, I said. Please, Derek threw up his hands. Great, perfect, bring the whole neighborhood in. I ignored him. Then Adrian said something that changed me more than I understood in the moment. What he said to you when you walked in, he said quietly, that's not normal. You know that, right? I had lived inside that dynamic for so long that hearing someone outside it name it, out loud, felt like a window opening in a sealed room. My mother said, I'm coming over there. The second she said it, something in Derek snapped. Maybe it was the realization that he was losing control. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was both. He started pacing. You want to do this? Fine. If you kick me out, I'll trash this place. I swear to God, Stella, I'll break every dish in that cabinet. The threat hung in the air. I looked at him and said, that would be destruction of my property in front of a witness. His eyes shot to Adrian. Adrian had his phone in his hand, not filming, just dialing. What are you doing? Derek demanded. Calling the non-emergency police line, Adrian said calmly. As a precaution. Derek's bravado collapsed instantly. You're calling the cops on me. She didn't call anyone, Adrian said. You just threatened to destroy her apartment in front of me. For the first time all day, Derek looked honestly afraid. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, and his voice cracked. I don't have anywhere. For one brief second, my chest tightened, because he was still my brother. Because somewhere under all of this was the kid who used to build blanket forts with me and walk me to the bus stop. But the man standing in front of me hadn't been that person for a long time. That's not my problem to solve anymore, Derek. He sat down after that and said nothing. About 20 minutes later, the lock clicked and Sarah walked in wearing hospital scrubs and exhaustion. She took in the whole scene in 2 seconds flat. Derek on the couch with blotchy eyes, Adrian near the counter, me at the kitchen table with the lease spread out in front of me. What did I miss? She asked. I gave her the short version. She nodded once, set a folder on the table and said, I brought your discharge papers. And I printed the tenant rights summary for this state. I could have laughed. Derek looked at her from the couch. You're in on this too. Sarah didn't flinch. I'm not against you, Derek. I'm for Stella. He had no answer for that. Neither did I. Adrian caught my eye then and tilted his head slightly toward the door, a silent question. You can go if you need to, I told him. Thank you. For everything, he nodded. Call if anything escalates. Then he left quietly. Sarah stayed. My mother arrived 43 minutes later, still in pajamas under a coat, slippers on her feet. She had clearly driven straight over. She stepped inside, took in Sarah in scrubs, me at the table, the paperwork, the dishes, the smell, the beer cans, the state of the apartment. Then she said, already gearing up for performance, my daughter is being manipulated by outsiders against her own family. No one manipulated me, I said. I decided. She ignored that and gestured at the mess. So he's a little messy, that's what brothers are, you're overreacting. Mrs. Anderson, Sarah said evenly, those dishes are 4 days old. Stella was in the hospital having emergency surgery. Mom blinked, recalculated, and tried a different direction. You want to destroy this family over dirty plates. This isn't about dishes, I said. Sit down. She remained standing for another beat, clutching her purse like a shield, then finally sat. I laid the bank statements in front of her. 6 pages, highlighted. I'd done it from my hospital bed with Sarah's laptop and a highlighter borrowed from the nurse's station. In 4 years, I said, I've paid $52,800 in rent. I've sent you $14,400. I've covered utilities, groceries, and everything else. Altogether, it's more than $86,000. My mother stared at the papers without touching them. Family doesn't do accounting, she said. Family also doesn't do this. She tried guilt first. I sacrificed my whole life for you too. I know you sacrificed, I said, and then you weaponized it. Then deflection. If it was really that bad, why didn't you say something sooner? I did. Every time I did, you cried, and I learned that your tears ended the conversation. Then loyalty. Brothers and sisters help each other. Name one thing Derek has done for me. She looked at him. He stared at the floor. She looked back at me. Nothing. Finally, in a much smaller voice, she said, I didn't think it was this bad. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first honest sentence she'd spoken all night. I stood up slowly, my side pulling, and Sarah's hand came to my elbow to steady me. Here's what's going to happen. Derek has 30 days to move out. Not less, not more. The $300 a month I've been sending you stops today. And if either of you contacts me to guilt me, threaten me, or send relatives after me, I will go no contact. The word boundary hung in the room like a final verdict. Then I turned to Derek. You're 27 years old. You've had 4 years of free rent, free food, and free labor. You need to figure out your next step without me. Where am I supposed to go? He whispered. Mom's house. A friend's couch, a room you pay for yourself. That part is no longer mine. He looked at Mom. Mom looked at her hands. Then she looked up at me and asked quietly, Can I still call you? When you're ready to speak to me with respect, yes. Not for money, not to guilt me, not to advocate for Derek. Those conversations are over. She nodded once. Then she stood, buttoned her coat, and walked to the door. Derek followed her out. He would come back for his things later, but that night, he left with nothing. At the threshold, my mother turned once and said, You'll regret this. But her voice shook so badly it sounded less like a warning and more like fear. Then the door closed. The lock clicked. And for the first time in 4 years, the apartment was mine again. Sarah heated up soup from a can she found in the back of the pantry and poured it into mugs because the clean bowls were all in my room. We sat on the couch together, and I looked around at the stale cushions, the empty beer cans, the mess I would clean tomorrow. How are you feeling? She asked. She meant the surgery, but also everything else. Like I've been carrying a backpack full of bricks, I said, and somebody finally cut the straps. She squeezed my hand. Later, she changed my bandage with the same calm efficiency she used on her patients. Then, she slept on an air mattress in my room because neither of us wanted her on the couch. Before she turned off the lamp, she looked at me and said, You did the right thing. I know. No, I mean it. I've wanted to say something for years, but it had to come from you. She was right. If she'd forced me into this before I was ready, I would have seen her as one more person trying to control my life. Instead, she had simply stayed close enough to help the moment I chose. The apartment was so quiet that night it almost startled me. No TV, no footsteps in the kitchen, no cans clinking, just the radiator, traffic in the distance, and my own breathing. It sounded like freedom. 3 days later, the messages from relatives started arriving. Aunt Helen, Uncle Robert, Grandma Joyce, your mother is devastated. Derek is your blood. Family sticks together. I answered Aunt Helen when she called. Did Mom tell you I was in the hospital? I asked. A pause. She said you had a stomach bug and were being dramatic. Of course she had. I had emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix. I was hospitalized for 4 days. No one visited me. No one called. And when I came home, Derek told me to make him dinner. There was a long silence. She didn't tell us any of that, Aunt Helen said quietly. She told you the version that made me the villain. Ask her for the whole story before you call me again. To her credit, she did. 2 hours later, she called back and apologized. After that, the pressure from the relatives stopped. On the 10th day, Derek texted me, coming to get my stuff around noon. I replied, Sarah will be here. He arrived in a borrowed truck looking smaller than I remembered, like something in him had caved inward. He packed in silence for 20 minutes, stuffing clothes into garbage bags, boxing up his game console, taking down the TV from the wall and leaving 2 dark holes in the drywall. When he was done, he stood in the middle of the living room with the bags at his feet. Stell, he said, rough-voiced, I know I messed up. Just give me 3 more months. I'll find a job. I'll pay you back. You had 4 years. I know, I just thought, he trailed off. You thought things would stay the same, I said. He didn't deny it. I love you, Derek, I told him. But I can't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. He blinked hard, picked up his bags, and left. 25 days after the confrontation, my mother called again. Her voice was different. No sharpness, no performance, just tired. Derek moved back in with me, she said. It's a lot. I said nothing. I didn't realize how much you were doing, she admitted. The cooking, the cleaning, the bills, all of it, I didn't realize. Then, after a long silence, I asked the question I had been holding for years. The money I sent you, the $300 a month. What was it really for? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then she said, my rent. I was short every month. I used your money to cover the gap. There it was. No family fund, no shared expenses, just my mother too proud to admit she was struggling and too willing to make me carry the weight of it. I'm sorry, she said. The words landed awkwardly, like she'd never said them to me before. Maybe she hadn't. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. I know, it wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first honest exchange we'd had in years. By the 30th day, Derek's things were gone. Every bag, every cord, every sock behind the couch. Sarah came over with sparkling water and a spackle kit. We patched the holes in the wall. We mopped the floors. We scrubbed the kitchen slowly, with music playing, not with resentment but with ownership. I moved my desk by the window. I found a second-hand lamp. Sarah brought me a little plant and said it was impossible to kill. I set up auto-pay for the bills. For the first time in 4 years, the $300 I used to send my mother stayed in my account. I didn't celebrate. I just looked at the number and felt something I hadn't felt since I was 19. Breathing room. I went back to work 2 weeks later. Nobody made a spectacle of my return. Adrian didn't mention the apartment. He gave me the same calm nod he gave everyone else, and somehow that kindness meant more than any speech could have. I slept 7 hours a night now. I ate breakfast. My hands stopped shaking every time the phone rang. A couple weeks later, Adrian emailed me, meeting at 3, bring your portfolio. I sat across from him expecting a review. Instead, he slid a paper across the desk. A full-time offer, operations coordinator, benefits, salary, a real start date, a real future. This isn't charity, he said before I could speak. I flagged you for this before your leave, you earned it. I read the offer twice. Then I looked up and said, thank you. And I meant all of it, the job, the ride home, the silence he kept. The truth he spoke when I needed someone outside the storm to name what was happening. He nodded once. Keep going. A couple months later, Derek texted me, got a job, warehouse. Part-time but full-time is possible if I show up. I stared at that message for a while before replying, that's good, I hope it works out. No extra warmth, no emotional labor. No taking ownership of his progress, just acknowledgement. My mother and I started speaking every couple of weeks, short calls, careful calls. She talked about her garden, I talked about work. We didn't revisit the $86,000 or the years I spent financing a life that was draining mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and honesty was new for us. 3 months after everything changed, my apartment no longer looked like a place I was surviving in. There was a deep green rug in the living room, a bookshelf I assembled myself, a candle on the kitchen counter that smelled like cedar and orange. I cooked when I wanted to. Sometimes it was a full meal, sometimes it was cereal at 9 at night. The point was that it was my choice. One Thursday evening, I came home from work and found a plain cardboard box sitting outside my door on the welcome mat I had bought for myself. There was no label, no note. Inside, wrapped in newspaper, was a set of dishes. 4 plates, 4 bowls, white with a thin blue border. I knew immediately they were from my mother. They looked exactly like the ones my grandmother used when I was little, before everything in our family got so complicated. There was no apology in the box, no explanation. Just something simple that said, in its own quiet way, I remember. I washed each piece by hand and put them in the cabinet that used to hold Derek's protein powder and energy drinks. Then I cooked dinner and ate alone at my kitchen table in my quiet apartment on a plate that felt like it belonged there. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something gentler than silence. Sometime after that, I ran into Adrian at a quarterly meeting. Different division now, same building. Afterward, we ended up at the same coffee station in the break room. He looked at me and said, "Heard you got the coordinator spot." "I did. Janet says you're sharp," I smiled. "I stopped carrying weight that wasn't mine." He nodded once. That's the hardest thing to put down. He didn't ask about Derek. He didn't ask about my mother. He didn't bring up that day in my kitchen. He didn't have to. A year earlier, I was walking through those same halls pretending I was fine, racing home every night to feed someone who treated me like a servant in my own house. Now I was there because I had earned my place, because I had chosen myself, because I had finally understood that being strong did not mean being available for exploitation. Some nights I sit on my couch with the cedar and orange candle burning and look around at the apartment. The bookshelf, the rug, the blue-bordered dishes in the cabinet. The table where I spread out 4 years of receipts and finally said enough. People love to say blood is thicker than water. What I learned is that the people who truly hold you up are not always the ones you were born to obey. Sometimes they're the friend who brings your lease to the hospital without asking questions. Sometimes they're the man who drives you home after surgery, stands in your doorway, and quietly tells you that what you've been living with is not normal. Sometimes family is the people who help you hear yourself clearly. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop abandoning yourself for the sake of other people's comfort. I almost died before I understood that. I'm alive now, and for the first time in a very long time, I'm home.